So today we've got a person I fished with several times, and he certainly knows what he's doing. Been doing it a long time. He's got the hair to show it. And so, Bobby, why don't you get started and let's talk about the old drum.
My name is Bobby Brewer, Bald-Headed Bobby's Guide Service. I'm located here down in Oriental, and we're going to talk about the old drum today. I mean, the old drum are here now. The biggest push hasn't arrived yet, but there's certainly enough of them to catch. And you've probably been seeing a lot of posts on that. We went out this morning. Me and a buddy of mine just went out with our fly rods, and we got into them within 30 minutes. We had drum rolling around us, so they're definitely here right now. So these are just some of the size of them. These are 40 and 50 inch class fish that we catch. This is some that I caught in a kayak. Was doing a TV show, the kayak fishing show, and we were out filming for 3 days catching them in kayaks. These guys during the wintertime, they're out in the ocean. They're out deeper in the ocean, and then come about April when we're starting to do some, maybe May, when we're starting to do some cobia fishing. We start seeing these fish start to come in schools from deeper in the ocean. And they'll hang out over there at the coast, whether it's Ocracoke, whether it's Moorhead, wherever. They'll hang out over there through, May, June, July. And then in July, they start working their way into the rivers either through Moorhead City or Beaufort Inlet, through Drum Inlet, or through Ocracoke or Hatteras. And then they'll come into the Sound. So the age group on that, I saw a redfish. Once a redfish grows for the first couple of years about an inch a month, and then they start spawning when they're about 28, 29. So the slots and all we're catching, you can almost say if they're 20 inches or they're 20 months old or 20 months old. But after maybe 2.5 years, at that point, the fish that were born 2 years ago, once they leave, the fish will actually leave toward the end of September into October, from the rivers in the Sound, from the Neuse River and the Pamlico Sound. And then they'll go back out on the coast. They'll hang out there. We'll see them during false albacore season while we're fishing for them. And then about December, they go back out into the ocean. So that's kind of their cycle. The oldest fish that's been caught 62 years. The world record's caught off of Avon. It's 96 pounds. So that's a huge fish. The fish you saw there was probably 48, 50 inches and probably weighed 40 to 50 pounds. The typical size we catch is anywhere from 43 to 50. Sometimes you'll get into the 55s. I usually catch a couple. I've never caught one 60. They get caught out here. I've never caught one over 60 inches yet, but they're definitely here. So what happened about a month ago to 3 weeks ago, we started seeing the bait come through Beaufort or through Adams Creek, Cork Creek, Adams Creek that goes into the Neuse River. And then it started working its way upriver. So the New Bern area, or from Oriental to New Bern, was really void of a lot of good bait until about 3 weeks ago. And then all of a sudden the bait just showed up very plentiful. And then we started catching the old drum. We catch them year round, a few here, a few there. But really, we started catching them in numbers about 2 weeks ago. And when I say that, right now, the bulk of the fish are getting caught from almost Minnesota Beach up, from maybe a little bit out. The ones we caught was from upriver from Oriental. Today, I've caught some downriver toward the Sound, but there's not a lot of bait down there. The bait's so much more plentiful up toward New Bern right now. So if you want to go catch them right now, do that. A good place to put in if you're over at the coast is come put in Slocum Creek, the ramp there. If you're in the New Bern area, you can put in Lawson Creek, or you can come all the way down to Lee Landing. And if you go to Lee Landing, you'll come straight out Upper Broad Creek, and you'll go right to where they are. Also mixed in with the old drum is a lot of tarpon right now. Today we saw tarpon on 2 different occasions. In one place we saw 1 tarpon, and another place we probably saw 10 or 12 tarpon rolling. So if you like tarpon fishing, the tarpon are here now also. And they'll probably be here through the end of maybe mid-September, end of the month anyway. So a couple of ways to fish for these. Bottom fishing, that's really kind of done in the afternoon. Some people do it in the day, but really in the afternoon, the wind's up a little bit, so you can't use the popping cork. But to do that, I mean, that's some of the stuff I use right there. I use Penn 8000s, and I use TLD 15s. and basically we'll take mullet or menhaden and cut it in steaks and throw it out on the old drum rig, which I think is on the next slide, and let it sit. And in a minute, I'll show you where to do that at. But you can put 30-pound mono on there. A lot of people have 30-pound mono on that. I use about 50 or 60-pound braid, simply because I use those same rods when I tarpon fish. But 30-pound mono is more than enough weight. Then off your mono, then go down for the old drum. You can go 50-pound leader, and that's more than enough. I usually have about a 6. The fish are, say up to 5 feet long. So I try to have 6 or 7 feet of mono leader, so if they hit it with their tail, they're not nicking the braid, because I use braid on mine. And those rods you see there, those are usually 20 to 40-pound line class rods, or heavy rods. You could get with medium heavy rods, but again, tarpon are here right now, and if you get hit with a tarpon, you need a little bit heavier rod. So this is the old Lumpton rig, right? If you fish with bait from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., you have to use this rig. When you look at the weight up there, the weight has to be at least 2 ounces. I use 3 ounces, and then from the weight down to the circle hook, it cannot be longer than 6 inches. And this is on. If you go to North Carolina Marine Fisheries, it's on there. This picture is I probably took it off of there. But then we use 9-aught and 10-aught circle hooks, and that's the kind of the state regulation. And then you have to pinch the barbs on there. So what we do is, when we're bottom fishing, we'll take those reels we just saw, put a 50-pound leader on them, maybe an 80-pound leader, because sometimes you're rolling around on rocks. And then off of that, and I'd usually do, like I said, 6 to 8 feet, 10 feet. And then I tie to that rig, to the swivel that you see at the very top of it. And then what we do is I chum the water a lot. So what I'll do is, whatever I'm using as bait, and most of the time it's cut mullet or menhaden, and I'll take it and I'll go ahead and bait my rods. And if I've got fishing 6 rods, I try to throw them out in 6 different directions, so we can get a full spread around my boat. And then I'll take I'll take the same bait, and I'll cut it into really small pieces, as small as I can cut it. And then what I do, I have a wiffle ball bat, and I cut the end off the wiffle ball bat, load it up there, and I go to the bow of the boat, and I spread it all around the front of the bow of the boat to either side. And the reason I do that is because I've done it just off the back, and when I do that, it doesn't seem like the front rods get any action. So I do all of my chumming upstream at the bow of the boat, out in front of the bow of the boat. And by doing that, that draws the fish all the way up past all six hooks that I have in the water. And so, I mean, the reel drag's pretty critical. I tell you what, you guys can send me, because I'm kind of doing the bottom fishing other than telling you where to do it. You guys just send me a question or something in the chat, and I'll try to answer them as I go. But we're trying to get through this in about 30 minutes, so I'm going to kind of work my way through it. For popping cork, I use 4,000 series reels and 5,000 series reels. I've got one 3,000. It works fine. The deal is, you need about 15 to 20 pound or greater drags on there. As far as the line, I personally use 30-pound braid. Some people use 20. I personally use 30-pound braid. And that gets me about 170 to 210 yards of braid on my reel. Just depends on whatever I use. I use a couple of different ones. I'll use a pin spin fisher, and that'll be the 4500s. And I use the quantum smokes that are 4,000s and 5,000s. But any good reel works for you. And then as far as the rods, you use a 7 foot, 7.5 foot medium heavy and heavy rods, fast action. And the reason I use the heavy rods is because I use those same rods when I'm throwing it in May, when I'm down at the coast throwing bait and things like that at cobia. The minimum setup I would say to use is a medium heavy rod with a 3,000 series. Most of mine are 7 foot. Most of mine are 7 foot heavies with with 4,000 series reels on there and 30-pound braid, and then 50-pound leader off the end of them. And then I don't know if you guys do the popping cork or not, but kind of how it works right there. That's a picture of the popping cork. And when we pop it, we do a couple things. Those beads kind of click. And and we got a lot of shrimp in the water right now. Whenever shrimp swim, it clicks. So we're kind of simulating the sound of a shrimp swimming. And also those popping corks are concave. So when we pull them through the water, they spray water just like a bait fish is scooting across the water. So we throw them out, we let them sit, and on the end of that popping cork, and I use blabbermouth popping corks. A lot of people use Four Horsemen. I personally use blabbermouth. Four Horsemen works great too. But what we do, and also bombers, I think I'll show some of them here in a minute. But what we'll do is I'll come off if I'm fishing. It seems like August we get more of them closer to shore. And that's just because that's where the bait's at. So when I'm fishing closer to shore, I'll have a 2-foot leader off the bottom of it. And then in September, I pretty much go straight to the middle of the sound or middle of the river. And it's about 20, 22 foot deep at that point. And I'll have a 3, maybe even 4-foot leader on it and on the popping cork. So I kind of vary that, depends on the depth of the water. As far as right now, you can catch them in 2 foot of water. I heard somebody caught some in 1.5 foot of water. So basically what they're doing right now, they're coming in and they're working the edges of the grass and various things like that, looking for the crabs and looking for the shrimp, just like the slot reds do. But anyway, you throw out that popping cork, let it settle, and then you pop it 2 or 3 times. And then when you look on there, you can see when you pop it, the bait comes up and you can see the arrows as it falls back down. And that's pretty critical because what people will do, they'll start fishing and they get really excited. And then at that point, they'll pop it and they'll pop it and they'll pop it. And the bait really stays up close to the surface. So really what you should do is you should pop it once, pop it twice. You can vary your cadence and then wait, 3, 4, 5 seconds. You want that to settle all the way back down. And then normally you'll get your hit when it's falling down. And then pop it a couple more times. When you pop it, the bait will come up close to the surface. And then at that point, you can let it go all the way back down and wait again 3 or 4 seconds. And when you're doing it, you need to fish it all the way to the boat. A lot of people may fish it a third of the way to the boat, then reel it in. I've had more than one occasion where we're actually bringing the bait up beside the boat out of the water, and a low drum will come up from the water and snatch the bait in the air. So fish it all the way to your boat. Also, what we do is we'll use only here's some of the pictures of some of the corks that we use. The bottom one's a blabbermouth. The second one down is a paradise popper. And the first one, I can't remember exactly. I think that's a Cajun Thunder, the top one. But anyway, you don't use the third one. That's more of a trout setup. But any of those three will more than work when you use them. Their advantages and disadvantages. When you look at that paradise popper, that bomber popper, that's a wire that goes through it and it doesn't bend. Also, it's styrofoam. So what can happen is when you're fighting these things, you start to get them in the boat. If it's a wire, such as that Cajun Thunder on the top or the blabbermouth on the bottom, you can bend that wire right there. The bomber will not bend the wire. And also the bomber and the Cajun Thunder and Four Horsemen are made out of styrofoam, so you can't hurt them. I mean, you can nick them and all. The blabbermouth is made out of a hard plastic. The difference between the blabbermouth also is it has BBs on the inside of the hard plastic there. So not only does it throw weight up or throw water up, it'll make a rattling sound with a popping cork. So that's why I use that particular one. But if it hits the side of the boat 2 or 3 times, then at that point you can crack it and it'll start letting water in. And I think those things are $10 or $11, $12 a piece. I can't remember exactly how much they cost. The foam ones are definitely less expensive.
Also, just to tag on that, I think when the water is calm, it's better to use the styrofoam than the blabbermouth. Yeah,
you don't need the blabbermouth when the water's foam or when the water's calm. You can use the foams for sure. Whenever the water's a little rougher, it makes a little bit better, more noise for you. But yeah, you don't need to use the blabbermouth. I just have one setup and I just use it for everything, but you don't necessarily have to do that. As far as the plastics, I'm sponsored by Z-Man, so I use Z-Man products pretty much. And one of the main reasons I use them now during this time of year is because of the bluefish. We have a lot of bluefish over here too, and so they're a whole lot tougher. But what I use as far as the hook there, I use a 3/8 ounce TT lock is the name of it. It's a 3/8 ounce TT lock, and it's a 4/0 hook. And then with that, I'll use the Swimmers or SWIMMERZ. I'll use the 6-inch Swimmers. And that works. That's a real good combination right there. Some people will use a 1/4 ounce, and that's more than adequate to get that bait down. Reason I use the 3/8 is one of the things that I found out quickly is when people come down, they get to do it once a year. They're all excited and they just keep popping it and they never stop. And I use a heavier weight just so that we can get it to sink better or sink quicker. And also, I never know how good a caster the person is. So by having a little bit more weight on there, it allows them to cast it a little bit farther. But my setups is the blabbermouth or the bomber or the 4 horsemen. And I use a TT, a Z-Man TT lock, 3/8 ounce. You can also use a 1/4 ounce. And then I'll use a 6-inch Swimmers plastic on there. So the colors that I use predominantly are white. And then if you go over on the bottom row all the way to the end, it's a gold and black speck. I use that color. If you go to the bottom row, the second one over, that looks more like a mullet color. I use that one. It's called Bad Shad. And then if you go to the bottom row, the one that's past the red and the green color, that's colored more like a finger mullet. And so I use that particular one. Probably the next row down, those are my top choices. The next ones would be the pink. And then the next one would be the electric chicken, the chartreuse and the pink, along with the chartreuse. So those are kind of my colors that I use. I use the white, I use the gold, I use the one that's the two that kind of looks like mullet color. That's my top 4 choices right there. And then my next choices are the chartreuse and pink and the pink. That's kind of the colors that I use when I fish for them. In addition to, so if I'm out and I've got, say, 3 people on the boat, I'll have one person that'll do a pop and cork. I may have one person doing a top water, and I may have one person doing like using oh shoot, what's the one up the top left? All of a sudden it just escaped me. I've got several of them right here in my hand. I'll use a hard bait, the rattle trap. The one on the far right, that's a bomber. That's a bomber pogie. They no longer make that one, so you can't get that one. But basically what I'll do is I'll take these. That top water bait is a Sebille, Sebille, Splasher 120. And so I'll use that. I do that because it throws up a lot of water. But what I'll do is I'll take off those treble hooks and I'll replace them with either the 5/0 or 6/0 circle hook. And you can get them in line. You can buy those at most of the tackle shops will have them. But anyway, what I'll do is I usually have all 3 going at the same time. And if we can start getting hits on the top water, it's phenomenal to watch a 50-pound, 50-inch fish roll on the top water. Sounds like somebody just dropped a pumpkin or something in the water. It just explodes so much. But the only time like this morning when it was slick calm, that's when I would use the top water. But I'll always use a pop and cork and the rattle traps. I'll probably catch 75% of my fish on the pop and cork, and probably 20% of the fish on the rattle trap, and probably 5% on the top water. So that's the lures that I use right there. When I use the rattle traps, those are 1 ounce rattle traps, and 1 1/4, 1.5 ounce rattle traps is the size that I use for my rattle traps. And then fly fishing. I don't know if any of you guys fly fishing. That's all we did this morning. We went for about 3 hours. Me and a buddy of mine went fly fishing. What I'll use is this morning I was throwing a 10 weight rod. I've got 11 weight rods that I throw also. You can use a regular handle, or you can. I was throwing a regular rod today. A buddy of mine was throwing a spay rod. He's a little bit older. Want to get a little bit better casting in. For as far as the reels, the drags are really important. I personally use Nautilus reels. Nine, if I've got nine or 10 go together on most of these reels. So this morning I threw a Sage Maverick. I also have Sage Motives. Those are the two rods that I throw for them. And then I have Nautilus CCF X reels is what I use. And then on there, you got to put floating line. So on everything I have, I put 11 weight line. So I'm going, if I got a 10 weight rod, I go 11 weight line on there. And that just allows me to cast it just a little bit better. So what I'll do is I'll have my backing. I usually use 60-pound braid or 50-pound braid as far as a backing. Then I'll have the 90 or 100-foot line, whatever it is. And I personally use Rio. I'm with a Sage Rio group, so I use those guys. There's a lot of people out here use the TFO Axiom. It's a great rod. It works really good too. Almost any rod will work. And then from the line, I usually put about 300 feet or 300 yards of, if the reel's big enough, 300 yards of backing on. Then I'll have the 90 or 100 feet of the line, and I use a forward weighted line that allows me to cast it better. And then at that point, I'll put a 30-pound leader from there, from the line down to a popper. And I'm going to show you a popper here in a minute that we use for it. And then from there, I'll put a 3-foot leader, a 20-pound or 30-pound leader from the popper on down to the fly. So that's pretty much the setups that I use. And here's the popper. So what we kind of do just like the guys that go in the mountains and do a dry dropper, where we do these as far as poppers. So we simulate what we're doing with the pop and cork. So the bottom one is Gary Dubio, who lives about a mile up the road here from me. Gary came up with this a few years ago. And if you go to the Pop and Fly, you can buy that on Fly Fisherman's. You can get it on Amazon, but Gary developed that. And so basically, it's a pretty big foam with a terminal on each end that you can tie to. So we'll go from the fly line. We'll go about 5 or 6 feet down from 30-pound from the fly line down to the popper, and then I'll go another 2 foot to 3 feet on down to the fly that you see there. And once I come off the slideshow, I can show you some of these. But the flies that I'm using emulate the same colors that I talked about earlier. And one of the things you want to do, you want to have a little bit of weight on those flies, because when you pop it, if you don't put weight on it, it doesn't sink very fast, and you need it to sink very fast. So what I do is Gary and I do things a little bit differently. Gary will take it, he wraps his lead wire around his shaft in the middle of it, so he gets more of a floating down horizontal ones. I usually wrap mine on the head of them, and so mine dive down head first. So we do it just a little bit different. The results are pretty much the same. And also on the top, what you see, this is something that we actually make, and I'll show you some more here in a minute when I get off the presentation. Basically, that's a popper that you can buy in the store. That's like a rainy popper that you can buy in the store. And really what we do is we'll take that and we'll get a water bottle, and we take the cap off of a water bottle and we glue it to the mouth of that popper that you buy in the store. By doing that, we just make the mouth a little bit bigger, and it throws up more water for us. So that's how we do our fly fishing for them. We do the same way. We look for the bait balls. I'm going to get into that in just a second. We look for the bait balls. We pop it. We let it sink all the way down. These usually sink slower. So the cool thing about fly fishing is when a fish comes up to get it, you can usually see the fish coming from the depth of the water to come up and grab the fly and then take off with it. So that's pretty fun to see. So one of the things we talk about is these fish are in here to spawn right now. So one of the things we want to do is protect the fish. So, when we bring them out of the water, if people don't want to get a picture of them, we unhook them while they're still in the net and let them go. If they want to get a picture of them, if you look below that fish right there, I have a towel, and I usually have a wet towel, and we have it real wet. We put it on the person's lap, and then we put the fish on top of it. And we do that so we try to keep as much slime on the fish as we can. And then we get the picture real quick. And then at that point, we get it back into the water. There are some, there are bull sharks in the water here. So sometimes people will do it, and release it and hold it to the back of the fish. I personally don't do that because some people, they've taken some fish. I just throw it straight down as hard as I can. But the whole thing is to take the picture, get the fish back in the water, because the water is 85 degrees, and make sure you take care of the fish. Also, when you handle it, don't hold the fish straight up with some fish grips or anything. Grab it by the lower jaw, grab it by the belly, and carry it that way so you don't hurt the mouth area of the fish. All right, so where the fish are right now, if you look where that star is, it says Oriental, and you see where it's starting to go up on the V on the left side, up toward New Bern. That stretch from the bend up to New Bern is where the fish are right now. The bulk of the fish are up there at this time. Within the next 2 weeks, they'll probably slide down just a little bit. There'll be more bait down around the Oriental and out into the Sound. And the fish, when I book trips, I fill up my September trips first because we have the bulk of the fish here. And then I work my way back from the last part of August to the 1st of August. Just because we just have more fish. But right now the fish are from that bend up to New Bern if you want to go look for them. Like I said, Slocum Creek is on the bottom side. One of those little creeks that's going in is on the bottom side. And Lee Landing is off of Upper Broad Creek. It's really about the left side of where that circle is. That's about where Lee Landing is. And you can literally go out and find the fish right there. I've caught them almost out to the Sound. We've caught them up, but the bulk of the fish are upriver. But anyway, that's kind of the area right there that they are. The river on the top coming in, that's the Pamlico River. And then the smaller river between the two is the Bay River. Just right up above the stars, the Bay River. So you can work all the mouths of that. And out to the bottom right-hand corner, like at 4 o'clock, that's Cedar Island. Or that's Cedar Island area out there. So you can work that whole area. That's the area that I work anyway. You can go out of Ocracoke, you can go out of Cedar Island, but that's kind of the areas that I work. And that's the general area where the fish are. But again, right now, the fish are upriver if you guys want to go chase them right now. So we're going to talk about where to fish. So if you're bottom fishing, what you want to do is you want to find a drop. You want to find a drop or a rock, and you want to find it to where, like on a rock, it could be 2 or 3 feet drop, or on an edge. It could be you want to have 2 or 3 feet on there, and you want a contour change of 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 feet deep. If you go in the Neuse River, there's a channel or a drop that runs almost on both sides. It goes from 8 to 12 foot, so that's an excellent place in order to do it. If you were fishing a ridge or a rock, and I'll show pictures of rock in a minute, and the wind is blowing from the south, I would put my bow of my boat into the south where the wind's blowing, and I'd have the stern of my boat I wouldn't have it over the drop or the rock. I'd have it just before. So when I threw my bait out, I would throw my bait out in the deepest part. Let's say we're at an 8 to 12 foot drop. I'd have a couple of rods down the 12 foot. I may have a line up on the top of it at the 8 foot, and then I may have a rod or two that are down around the edge as well on the contour up. And then I would chum it, and all my chum would go against that ledge right there. And that's kind of what you're seeing right there. Actually, I think I got one for the ledges right there. So when you look at that, if you look at the top right one, I would have my boat probably midway in that picture, and then I would have lines down at the bottom at the 12 feet. Then I'd have them at the top at the 5 feet. All your chums, your stinks, all going back to the ledge. And as the fish go down, we call it just like a little highway. As they do that, they'll smell it, and then they'll go into it. Same thing on the rock. Here's just some rocks that have taken pictures of, and we'll do the same thing. We treat a rock just like we would do a ledge. We try to look for that contour. The rocks are usually in deeper water. They're usually in 15 to 20 feet of water, and so that's where we find the rocks. And mostly the rocks are more out in the sound, the mouth of the river, out into the sound is where the rocks are. The ledges are more so in the river itself. But that's how I would bottom fish those, and that's for bottom fishing. If I'm popping cork or topwater fishing, I'm looking for signs like that. That's a bait ball right there, and we look for the signs of that. And so when I see that, you'll find a couple of different bait balls types out here. You'll see them out of glass minnows. You'll see them out of Manhattan. Look for the ones out of Manhattan, and look for the ones that's getting Manhattan knocked up in the air, just like you would down at the coast. And then when you come with your popping cork, start out, you want to try to get as many fish off this bait ball as you can. So I tell my guys, I'll have one guy fish the left side of it. You want to throw past it, reel into it, because, if you look at fish, if you look into the videos, you got all the bait all tight in the center, and then you got a fish going all the way around it, kind of circling like cowboys and Indians. And so what I do is I have them throw past it, bait ball, and come and reel right back into the bait ball, because we'll look at the fish before they get into the bait ball. We'll go through the bait ball because there are going to be some fish under it. That's why it's at the top of the water. And then we reel it back through the bottom end of the bait ball. And what I try to do, I work the edges first. So if I catch a fish on the left side, it doesn't disrupt the fishes that's on the right side. So we just do that to try to catch as many fish as we can. And once we finish up, we'll throw right in the center. We'll start using the bait ball as a target and throw it in there. But also when you come to an area and you find multiple bait balls, one of the mistakes a lot of people do is they'll work a bait ball, and then they'll get on their motor, on their trolling motor, they'll run to the next bait ball, even when they're real close together. What you need to be able to do is drift. Try to, when you go into those bait balls, go to the upstream side of the bait balls, fish it, and just let the current drift you down, and get off your motor. Don't have your motor on, don't have your trolling motor on. That way you're quieter. You don't scatter the fish. So as long as you don't scatter the fish, you have a whole lot more chance of catching them. So last year, I probably caught 60% of my fish on bait balls, like you see, and I probably caught 40% of my fish where there was no bait whatsoever. I was just drifting between bait balls because the fish are there, and you're not scaring them. Obviously, if you see them tailing or if you see them rolling, go right for them at that point. It's pretty cool. We were out 2 weeks ago. I was out in West Bay over towards Cedar Island. We're finishing up a slot drum trip. And we came back through, and I wanted to go to one of the artificial reefs, and I pulled in, and literally as soon as I pulled in, two tarpon rolled. And so as soon as they rode, we're starting to get rigged up and trying to get my guys rigged up for tarpon. I look over, and all of a sudden I hear an old drum roll, and then look over, and the old drummer coming out of the water like tuna chasing bait. And so we hooked up with a couple of them like that. So yeah, that's another thing. I don't have a picture of that. If you're out there, right now, there's so much shrimp in the water, and that's what was going on this morning. There's so much shrimp on the water, and it's just subsurface. So what happens, the old drummer coming up and hitting it right now, and they're rolling on the surface. So if you hear a big splatter, start throwing to it, even though you don't see bait, because there's a lot of shrimp in the water. And this morning where we were fishing, there really wasn't that many bait balls, but we just knew there was a lot of shrimp. I could see it walking across the top of the surface. So fish that. There's another one somewhere. I was hoping that last statement says there's tarpon here too, but there's one I don't have in here. And what it is slicks, oil slicks. And so what'll happen is if you're out there and the water's calm and you see a sheen on top of the water, usually bait fish just got eaten below that. And so when you see that sheen pop up, or if that sheen is still tightly packed, throw in there, because there's some bigger fish eating down at the bottom of that. And so then basically here, I'm just saying there's tarpon here too. So, if you see tarpon, always have a rig set up for casting at tarpon if I'm out using the popping cork or something. So they're here. We saw them in two different places this morning, but we were fly fishing for Old Redfish for them. That's pretty much it. So the fish are here. They got here about 2 weeks ago with some volume to them. They're up toward Newbern. More fish will start coming. The next moon is probably in a week away or something like that. I don't know when the moons are. I haven't looked. But anyway, if you see over here, if you see we get some northeast winds, at that point, that's going to push more bait into the sound, from the sound into the river. And at that point, you'll have more old drums showing up into the river at that point. So if you see a good northeast winds for a day or two, we're going to, at that point, from Minnesota Beach is where that bend occurs, out to the Pamlico Sound and into the Sound. You'll start seeing a lot more drum getting caught. That'll bring in the bait. Then right behind it, the old drum will come in right behind it.